A while back I put out a call for suggestions of games that I could review, and the results were interesting. So interesting in fact that I've only reviewed 2 off of that list, and neither of them got multiple votes. Okay, so 2 games got multiple votes. What's the deal with them? Well, number 1, why do people want me to review Day of the Tentacle? You hardly need me to tell you that this is a goddamn masterpiece. The consensus on this is fairly universal, and if I disagreed with that, then I'd maybe have more incentive to go after it. As for the other game that got multiple votes, that's a bit more complicated. Grim Fandango might be the last great adventure game released from the original point-and-click era. Go ask the internet about it and you're likely to get a small but extremely loud cry of support. And yet I've put off playing this game for the longest time. I've had a copy for years, and there's enough love for it that there's programs that let you play it on modern Windows, so even that's not an issue. And when I'm dealing with a game written by Tim Schafer, the man behind some of my favourite games of all time, there's going to be a pretty hefty hurdle in my way. So, why haven't I played this in the 16 damn years that it's been out? Okay, a lot of you know what I'm going to say here, so I'll phrase it as a question. How long can I legally spend bitching about the controls? Because I hated the controls. Rather than even require a mouse, you control your character directly. By default, it's tank controls, meaning up goes forward, left and right turn, down goes back. Given the fact that I'm a fairly big Resident Evil fan, that actually felt a bit weird to say. And it's not as if the PC was completely alien to games that use time controls, especially in conjunction with pre-rendered backgrounds. But there is a big difference between the way Grim Fandango and, for the sake of example, BioForge implement these controls, the biggest of which pops up when you run into a wall. Bear in mind that's when, not if. Whether you're playing Grim Fandango or, for the sake of example, Resident Evil 2, this is going to happen. Grim Fandango tries to compensate by turning you in a direction parallel to the wall. This is fine sometimes, you can navigate a whole area just by pressing forward. But whilst BioForge would have given you the chance to react, Grim will send you flying off in the wrong direction before you can say Buenos Dias. Given the design of some of the earlier environments, you'll spend roughly 9001% more time than you'd like playing protagonist pinball. Stupid as it might look, I would rather Manny just jog on the spot and leave me to fix his direction. I mean, I know I said I love keyboard shortcuts, and I do, but this is not what I had in mind. Now, bitch as I may, bitch as I might, you do have an alternative. The game has camera relative controls also, meaning that up will send you away from the screen, left will send you directly to the left, and so on. This has the advantage of not having to wait a full second to turn 180 degrees, but you'll still wall walk all the goddamn time. I suggest you try both control methods, and don't be afraid to switch between them during play. There's no quick key for this, but all the menu options have keyboard shortcuts, so you can probably change it quickly enough if you learn them. Hell, it'll probably be committed to muscle memory by the time you're done. Both control methods have their own quirks. I tend to stick to tank controls, that way I know if the camera angle changes I won't start walking back and forth between areas. Protagonist pinball is pretty annoying, but protagonist ping pong isn't any better. Plus the twitchy camera movements that camera relative controls generate kinda take me out of the experience. Pressing the use key will maneuver Manny into position with whatever he was looking at, which solves the problem of not being able to get to objects, but it does break the flow when you have to sit and wait impotently for a few seconds while the game essentially corrects itself. But it works. No matter what control scheme you choose, there's gonna be problems. Aside from some of the giant areas you're expected to hold down the keys to run across, the only objects you can examine or use are indicated by Manny turning his head toward them as he gets close, meaning that he can usually only interact with things that are right beside him. On top of that, you have to carefully turn to focus on individual items in close proximity, which pretty much ruled out the use of camera relative controls for me. Escape from Monkey Island ran on the same engine with 2 years worth of improvements, one of which was letting you cycle between nearby items, and believe me, that's the last time you'll hear me praise Escape from Monkey Island over literally anything else. The problem with only being able to focus on things within arm's reach is that it feels very restricting. One might argue that this cuts down on the pixel hunting that the genre was guilty of in the early days, but you need to both walk over to the thing in question, then wrestle yourself into position in order to do anything with those items in the first place. Not to mention that it restricts you to objects at your character's vertical level, and that means you're missing the opportunity to drop puzzle hints, make a joke, or expand the lore of the very interesting world you're in. Speaking of an interesting world, I haven't even talked about the story yet, and I'm pretty sure the internet police are going to come get me if I don't give the whole controls thing a break. Grim Fandango is set in a world inspired by the famous Dia de Muertos, or Day of the Dead holiday. You play as Manny Calavera, who guides dead souls to the afterlife by selling them travel packages. The more pious the person, the fancier the transport Manny can commission to take them there, ranging from the Express No. 9 train all the way down to a 4-year walk through the perilous afterlife. Obviously Manny himself didn't qualify for a decent package and has to work at the Department of Death for his sins. Literally. Having been stuck with a steady stream of dead-end clients for quite a while, he decides to steal one from his more successful co-worker. He sets the stolen client down, but despite checking every possible box on the I am a goddamn saint checklist, Manny can only give her the most basic package.
Titled to a first-class ticket to... nowhere?
Before this discrepancy can be sorted out, the client disappears to begin her long journey. Manny does the only thing he can. Go after her to make sure he doesn't get fat, to make sure she gets the afterlife she deserves.
She's my ticket out of here.
When I finally decided to let my big gripe go and give this game a chance, it surprised me. If you know anything about Tim Schafer, you know to expect off-the-wall ideas, and playing a travel agent for the dead fits this category quite nicely. And in fairness, that is one thing that Grim Fandango does not lack. Damn near every line is some degree of funny, and if you've ever laughed at Schafer's writing in other games, you'll get a lot out of this. It really helps that the voice cast are fantastic, selling each character's lines perfectly, and then the music comes in and utterly cements the mood, flipping between a film noir score, swing and traditional sounding Mexican music with utter ease. I didn't think I'd be able to care so much about the fate of this old pile of bones, but damn it, I did. And on the topic of fate, the game sticks to the LucasArts doctrine of no deaths, no game overs, helpfully subverted by the fact that Manny is dead already. Although there is a gun that causes people to sprout flowers, but that's already closer to spoilers than I'd like. The actual puzzles in the game, aside from a few at the beginning, manage to avert moon logic and make some modicum of sense. LucasArts had the experience and the ethos to avoid doing that to players. It's not something Schafer's often guilty of. You get asked to do weird stuff, sure, like steal some pigeon eggs.
You must come with me, young ones, for I am the Grim Reaper.
But the problems with doing that and the workaround the game expects you to employ are logical. But we expect all that from a LucasArts adventure game. What surprised me was the fact that the graphics still hold up. The start of the 3D era was a treacherous time for PC gamers, and certain camera angles do absolutely nothing for Manny, but those CG backgrounds still hold up nicely. It's possible that some trickery was done on the part of Residual VM, that's the sister project of Scum VM that I used to run this game on modern Windows, but I don't see what they could have reasonably done to improve the backgrounds without straight up replacing them. So the fact that this game still looks good today is a big fat plus. You might expect another comparison to BioForge at this point, but that was made to run on a 486 CPU with 8 megs of RAM as opposed to a Pentium 133 with 16 meg of RAM. It's not exactly a fair comparison, even before you bring hardware acceleration into it. And sure, Grim's 3D models were a bit low res and there's jaggies about, but I feel it's retained the look the developers were going for. It might seem like I've spent half the review bitching about the controls, and there's a reason for that, but there's actually not much else to complain about. Only wee niggling things like having to wait for character animations to finish despite skipping a line of dialogue.
To drive!
Or when you pick the scythe out of your inventory by mistake and you have to waste 8 seconds putting it back. Then there's the goddamn elevators being 5 times trickier than they have any right to be, but none of this stopped me playing. And as if the internet was reading my goddamn mind, someone's created a version of Residual VM that lets you play this as an actual point-and-click adventure, with a cursor and everything. I'm not sure if I'm annoyed that this person had the same idea I had and did it first, or if I'm just glad I didn't have to do the work myself. At the time of writing it's in an alpha state, so there's no guarantee you can complete the game using this, but damn is it still awesome. This is how much people love this game. There is a reason this has the cult following that it does. For something that served as Tim Schafer's last hurrah before leaving LucasArts, the last one that got released anyway, I can't think of a better way to do it than having the sheer brass clanking ballsacks to overturn one of the genre's main staples and deliver one of its most loved examples in the process. Even if those controls were a misstep large enough to clear the Atlantic. Bear all that in mind when I tell you that you should play Grim Fandango. Simply put, it'll surprise you. Especially if you type blam while you're in game.
Ouch.